It's 10:02. We'll call this meeting of the Victoria Senior Advisory Committee to order. And on the roll call, we have Susan Bell.
Present.
Kleinfelter's here. Jack.
Hi.
Nancy.
Present.
Curtis.
Here.
And Jenny.
Yep.
Absent are Julie and Patrick. Love this first item. It's always petitions, proclamations, suggestions, and complaints. I'm waiting for somebody to have a proclamation. It's
I
Do you have any suggestions or complaints or?
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Good
Thank you,
proclamation.
Jack. We'll turn to the staff then. Alyssa, do you have any news to share?
Yeah, I just have one note that the Park and Recreation's winter brochure is coming out soon, so please check your mailboxes because you'll be getting that in the mail shortly.
All right, thank you. We have Don with us. Don, do you have any information to share or announcements?
Not much, just stay healthy out there. There's a lot going around. There's still COVID, there's the flu, there's RSVP, and strep is all going around. So
Great.
healthy and safe.
So I watch the national numbers, every day. New York Times publishes them. We're back up to 500 deaths a day. Any changes like that? Because that was down to like 200 at one point earlier in the year. What's the county like? Are we going up, staying the same, or?
The county is going up. The data isn't for deaths, obviously you can count that.
Yeah,
And
that's
for
the easy
cases,
one.
It's hard to count because unless you go to the hospital, you're not really being counted. But the cases are going up. There's 2 more variants in the county. We get that information. I won't tell you what they're called because they're just letters and numbers at this point. So yeah, it is going up at kind of a steady pace.
Any discussion about mask wearing? I know that New York City's recommending masks again.
No, there hasn't been any, but in public health, we all think it would be a good idea because there's like 5 things going around, so a mask would protect you from, things like strep. They sent out data for the month of November. The cases of strep this year are double what they are last year.
Wow.
And there's an amoxicillin shortage. RSVP is hitting really hard in the children. All the pediatric beds are full. Children's Hospital. That may have peaked, but it's then kind of reaching out to the assisted living because it also affects older adults. And then the flu hit early and hard this year. So I do have a box of COVID tests that have been they haven't been in my car, but I'm bringing them back to the office. If anyone wants a free COVID test, please take them.
Yeah.
If not, I'm offering them to the city. So.
Are those home tests that we get the results ourselves, or do we have to mail them in?
They're home tests that you get the results yourself.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Could use them. Thank you. It's always nice to have you here. You always bring such cheery, good news.
I know.
Great. So I think we're down to approving the minutes of our last meeting. Anybody like to move approval of the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Curtis seconds.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. It carries. Now we're down to new business. And Alyssa, the floor is yours.
Yeah, of course. So the first item we'll be discussing is the 2023 annual calendar. I put this each at one of your stations at the dais so then you can look at it. I know that there's a digital version that was sent over, but sometimes, specifically calendars, it's always nice to have that paper copy. So historically, Senior Advisory Committee meetings have been held that first Monday at 10 a.m. And we're proposing to keep that schedule for 2023. This will be reviewed by City Council at their first meeting in January 9th, and then they'll make that formal approval of the calendar. But I wanted to present it to you all before City Council takes a look at it to see if there's any changes you'd like to make, if there's any red flags on the calendar, things that you know that most of us won't be attending, because then we can make that change now instead of having to make that change later in the year.
I see on the calendar we're not meeting in January. and unless I'm wrong, July, September. So 3 out of the 12 months. It doesn't look like we're on the calendar.
You were right. In January, we do need to add you guys to the calendar. Typically, it's always that first Monday, so that would be the 2nd. And city offices are closed that day. So we'll have to make that change. Thank you for pointing that out. And we can do January 9th if that works for everybody.
I won't be here, but don't worry about me.
Is that a holiday, though? No.
No, the 9th is not a holiday. It would be another city council meeting day, similar to like today, where we push the meeting back 1 week. And that usually falls on the city council schedule. And then for July, we are on July 10th. Let's see. On the
Oh, it just,
paper copy, you
Color
can
didn't
kind of
come
see that it fades 2 different
Okay.
colors together. So we're still on that 10th meeting because July 3rd is going to also be a city holiday. And then similar with
September.
It's September 11th. We had that weird giant
You
mix
didn't,
of
you didn't figure
colors.
that out, that it bled the color a little bit.
Right,
I didn't either.
now when I look really close.
You can
Make
see
it really
that.
tricky on all of us. Yes, but we can figure out January. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm sure it was just a miss that we didn't multicolor one of the dates. So does anyone else have any problems with January 9th? All right. Great, we will make that change and
You'll be here, you can share.
any other concerns with the calendar? Anything else that we want to adjust now? Otherwise, we can always adjust later in the year. That's always an option. We'll just need to notice the meeting as a reschedule or cancellation or whatever have you.
We have the date for the, I'm blanking on the name of our
Senior Expo?
expo, yeah.
We don't, but we anticipate that coming up in May sometime.
Okay. So we would probably meet right before that if we meet on May 1, which would be helpful. Okay.
Talking about, will this come up later, but talking about the Senior Expo, not bad for the first year. I know a lot of vendors talked about where was the publicity, the numbers were low. I was at the, I went to the Chan Senior Expo in like the fall, and I was at the Chaska one, and I don't know what we can do to get things more interactive and get more people. Now, of course, they all have very active senior programming and communities, so they draw from those. So that's something we might want to talk about and consider.
I think that's great, and we can add that right to the January meeting and have that discussion. There's also opportunity to partner with other organizations, like the City of Carver. They don't have a senior expo, at least not to my awareness, or partner with Chaska and Chan to collaborate on even hosting a larger expo. So that's just ideas that have been thrown out there by staff, but we can discuss that in January.
I think for Chaska, I think Chaska Park and Rec does provide programming, a lot of the programming for Chaska. So, but yep, that would be a good discussion.
I think so as well.
We talked about partnering too, like with Park and Rec, instead of meeting like the day they dedicate the courts, the new ones.
Yes.
Something like that would be good. I won't be here in January, but that's my 2 cents worth. It'd be a good idea to partner or to piggyback on another date or activity like that.
Wonderful.
Move on to the packets.
Yes, we can. Pull that one up. So another quick item for discussion. A couple weeks ago, I sent out the revised senior resource packet. The only additional item, and I'm going to scroll down to it, and I have to pause and thank Dawn for providing this to us at one of our recent meetings, is we added, did I skip it already? A section for legal services. Don provided us some resources, the Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Service at our last meeting, and that is something we wanted to add. And then in addition, staff found the lawhelpminnesota.org resource. So we wanted to include legal. That was something we were missing in prior years. So we wanted to make sure that we could make sure that it's included this year since it's such a needed service. The other things that have been changed are any phone numbers that were outdated, any email address, website links, those things were just cleaned up, and so we can get the new phone numbers, websites, links to the new packet.
I think this is unbelievable. When I looked through it, I couldn't imagine there were that many things available to us. Good for you. Thank you.
Thank all of you.
We doing tracking on the website to see how many hits we're getting?
Great question. That was something we were supposed to bring back regularly, and I do have to apologize. That is on me for not bringing that back, and I can make sure we have that for our upcoming meetings. Yes. Yep. We are switching our website in 2023, so we'll have a new website with a new tracking service, so it might look a little differently, but I can get you those numbers after this meeting, so we can look where we are at now.
You can get historical, that would be great.
Yep, I can do that.
If it's going over what happened. Thank you.
No, my apologies there.
That's all right. No problem.
This was available at the Victoria Recreation Center, just a flyer on the resource guide. So I was happy to see that.
Nice.
Wonderful. Does anyone else or anyone from the committee have anything that hasn't been listed in the packet that we should be adding? Anything that you saw was a miss, spelling errors, just those little things that we might have not caught.
I know Trellis is a resource, but I can't actually tell you what they do. I remember talking about it last time, and is it on here?
Trellis is on here through the Juniper site.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard to see because it's breaking two pages. We'll have to fix that formatting issue so it's all on the same page.
Okay, good.
We don't have Trellis as just an individual site, but we do have the senior linkage line, which is something they provide, and it's kind of their #1 resource. We could definitely add Trellis as just that overall organization, since they do have so many resources to to provide. So that wouldn't be a bad addition for us.
Well, that's open to the committee. I just remember we had chatted about Trellis, and I couldn't find it in here.
Yeah, the more ways you link to it or cross-reference, the better.
We can add that. Wonderful. Anything else from the group? All right. So what the plan is we'll go ahead and fix the formatting error that I just see right here. We'll add Trellis as an organization, and then I'll grab you some historic information on the website. And the plan is to change this from draft to final and get this printed for the 2023 year.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Thank you all for your
I
help on
do
this.
have one thing. Well, with the new Park and Recreation booklet that's coming out, is there mention of that anywhere in the booklet?
Great question. Yeah, that was brought up in October by the committee, is to get into the winter brochure. And yes, we will be in the winter brochure. The resource package or the guide will be referenced, as well as there'll be some sort of table of contents for any senior focused related programs this year. So that's something we did and we were able to add. Great. Well then, should we move on to the next item?
Good.
All right, we are just moving right along. So the last item for discussion before you is the 2023 committee work plan. 1 second here. So the Victoria City Council requests that each of their advisory committees generate a work plan for that upcoming year. And this has been something we've been talking about for the last couple of months of what does this work plan really mean to us? What do we want to add to it? What projects do we want to take on? And we've had some conversations with Carver County, with community walkability. We've discussed walkability in developing trails in our community. We've discussed launching a business or a workplace dementia training when Trellis came. And then we've also talked about conducting a visioning exercise related to senior focused recreational programming. Now, internally, we've had some discussions on what we think we can handle in the 2023 year, what's going to be the best next step for us. And what staff is proposing, and for you to all discuss this morning, is we're thinking that moving towards a walkability program where we have you, as well as inviting other community members, as well as the Park and Recreation Committee, to develop some sort of trail route system in our community in 2023, and then trying to identify ways that we can better map it, ways that we can better sign those trail routes, and hopefully really make something robust out of our internal trail network. So that was what I have proposed for you as kind of the new item. But before we get into that, I'll walk through the work plan that's on our screens and just go one by one. That's what's on there. So the first is conduct an assessment of the senior resource packet to ensure its relevancy and accuracy. That's exactly what we just did, is just to take a look and make sure that we are checking those links, checking those phone numbers, as well as making sure we're adding new things as they come up. Coordinate and promote that Senior Resource Expo, which kick-started last year, and I think that's a great idea, and then we can definitely start that conversation in January. Recommend new ways to better communicate and reach Victoria's 55-plus population. If there's any other ways that we can definitely improve as staff, as a community, that we can do that. And go ahead, Sue.
Yeah. I think that is great to continue to look at better ways to communicate. But I think often, what are we really, the walkability study is a wonderful thing. But what are we really going to communicate? We've got the resource package, but we don't really offer or ever get to recreational or more opportunities here in our city for people 55 and older. So when does that topic come up about looking to provide more programming ideas and things to serve our 55 and better citizens?
That is an absolute great question. And I think a prime example of what that looks like is specifically for the winter brochure. This committee brought to our attention that we don't talk about senior programming in our brochure. And because of that, we've added it to our webpage so people can go directly to our recreation webpage and click on 55 plus. In our winter brochure, they'll have a table of contents of where specifically 55 plus programming lies. And we're going to start advertising more on that senior resource guide within that brochure. So it's a little informal, but it does really make an impact when those ideas come up, that you guys feel comfortable just saying, we can do better in X, Y, and Z, and bringing those ideas to the table.
Are there any new programs or any things in that winter brochure that really kind of target, other than pickleball and some of the fitness classes?
Great question. They did launch a Medicare program this year, which was new for us and very targeted to the senior population. Now, the trouble is that we don't necessarily have an entire staff to dedicate towards more programming. So we're really limited on the availability and time frame for adding new programs to our team. But if that's something the committee is interested in doing, we could definitely see what we could do in partnership with the Park and Rec to develop new programs. The other program that's coming out in the 2023 year is, it's not Cookies with a Cop, it's Donuts with a Deputy. That's what it is, Donuts with a Deputy, where they're bringing in one of our Carver County Sheriff's deputies, and it's going to be a monthly discussion on various topics related to crime, safety, prevention, and that also really targets the older population and getting those resources, similar to what we do at these meetings, getting those resources in people's hands.
Thank you.
So I want to follow up on what you said. Are you concerned that maybe this is an ongoing activity that we all are thinking about, or are you looking for a marker, like in May, we're going to talk about or brainstorm ideas for the community?
I just look at, we've been a committee for roughly a year and a half, and we've accomplished a lot. The resource guide, other things. And I did go to one of the Medicare sessions that was offered, and that was good. But I'm looking at all the other communities around, and as our city grows, and with the addition of new townhomes and condos and all this, we have a population, but when are we going to, when would it be possible to offer some more programming in our community for active older adults? Was that something the other night at the Lions Park, or the pavilion? We have a pretty wonderful building there that we could offer some programming. I was in Waconia, and when I worked in Chanhassen, they came to me for like 3 or 4 years trying to build networks and programming for seniors. All of a sudden, they're offering like 15 things. So I just think as we grow population-wise, to look and identify some things that can bring seniors together.
Alyssa, can I piggyback on that too? Because when I was looking at the material you sent out in advance, I saw that you had bulleted 3 items that we had talked about as a committee that might be included in the 2023 work plan. Walkability, launching of business dimension training, and the visioning exercise of senior-focused recreation programs. That's what Sue's talking about.
Yes, I am.
And what we're looking at here includes 1 out of 3. The first one. So can you talk about the conversations that went on with staff about including 1 out of 3 and pushing the other 2 off? Obviously, there's a resource reason for it.
Yeah, great question. I think we can definitely talk about that. So I can scroll back up. Oh, I'm going to disappear things. There we go. Now I'll scroll back up to those. And I'll skip over walkability because I think we've kind of covered that. So we did talk about dementia training, and we did talk about recreation programming, creating a visioning through that. So another piece of this is the city council dais. We're also talking about budgeting, and we're talking about staffing for the next upcoming years. And one of our biggest challenges is that we do not have the recreation staff adequate to add additional programming for any sort of activities. Like, we're just really, I wouldn't say struggling. I think Holly and Ann do an excellent job at the Recreation Center and bringing high quality programs and partnering with other organizations. However, we're reaching that point where we're hitting max capacity on them as a team, as well as their budget and their resources. So in the same kind of time frame, City Council is looking at adding additional staff. At our last budget workshop, City Council received a presentation about our 5-year staffing plan, and part of that includes recreation programming. However, that's not going to be until another couple of years or so, and I think that is when we start kickstarting those conversations on recreation programming and our needs, because then we'll have some staff dedicated to really hone in on that programming.
Do we have to wait 2 or 3 years? I do know how busy they are. But you've got a committee here that is willing to assist probably with some programs, and at least sit down and have a discussion with them about what are some things that could happen that wouldn't be real labor intense. And we've never had that discussion.
Yeah, we could definitely add to that discussion and bring the recreation centers folks over to see what their interest is, what their capacity is. The other part is open meeting law that we have to take in account if we start having additional meetings outside of the ones that we talked about earlier, that we're going to have to think about, how do we get those noticed? How do we make sure that the public is aware, and just those little nuanced things that we'll have to talk about.
I have a suggestion. I think that's a good one to have the Park and Rec folks here. They're on our agenda once a year, as I recall, anyway. But on this same topic, I would like to hear more about what the other communities do. Sue's really knowledgeable about what happens in Chanhassen and so forth. So as we think about our meeting schedule, I think it would be helpful to have maybe representatives, if possible, from those other communities, so we hear what they do, and that might help us figure out what would be good for us to promote or work on or add to our plan.
There are a couple things. There are senior commissions in other areas. I think Chaska's one of the only cities in Carver County that doesn't have one, or, but you can access a lot of that information online. What really got me thinking about this is my daughter lives in Waconia, and I was with my grandkids, and I was looking, and all of a sudden Waconia is utilizing their Safari Island, they're utilizing City Hall for just some activities. Something popped up, they've got a day or, you know, senior matinee with the movie theater and a lunch. But you can look at some of those things that they're doing and compare. And I know back in 1992 in the city of Chanhassen, which probably was a population as big as Victoria, their senior commission was a driving force in helping get some ground roots activities and things growing as the city moved on. So your idea about asking other people or even pulling up some of the information and seeing what other cities have to offer, I like that idea.
Well, and I have to assume that the city council is preoccupied with downtown West. And I was happy to see that you had put the senior committee on, you know, the downtown West, put the downtown West on our radar. That's something that we hadn't talked about previously. So that's good. But in addition to talking to Ann, is there any way we could do more collaboration with the Parks and Rec Committee? Are senior issues on their radar is my question, and that's a question I don't know the answer to.
Yeah, that is a great question. The Park and Rec Committee, for those who aren't aware, I'm sure all of you are, but just for those who aren't, they do review new parks that are coming online and make sure that new parks are equitable and can be inclusive for everybody. They also look at old parks when they're replacing equipment, replacing playgrounds, things like that, and make an assessment and bring back, you know, recommendations to Park and Rec and for City Council on what should go next on those things. I think it would be appropriate to see if there's interest again on either it's a liaison, you know, or somebody who wants to be part of both committees and can kind of be that voice, or if it's Anne coming and talking about those projects as well, or just receiving some feedback before moving forward.
I'm somehow on Chanhassen. The mayor comes out once a week or once a month and has a general report of what has happened and excuse me, and what will happen. And I got into an activity class at the Chanhassen Rec Center. They just happen to be offering it as getting well or something to that effect, and not terribly active and so on, but at least I found something. And that's, maybe that would be something. The mayor does things occasionally, but maybe they could include a few other things about seniors or possibilities for seniors.
Yeah. The other option, if we're talking about communication again, is if the senior commission wants to release some sort of publication on their own. I would have to talk about what that would cost us to do that, but that is an option for us if that would be of interest. As Sue, you mentioned creating or developing our own groups or classes or activities and kind of managing that as a committee. I think this is an appropriate conversation to see if that's actually something that the committee as a whole isn't interested in, and what we can do then on our side is just to look at what that would look like for programming wise, if it would be renting out the pavilion once a month and we advertise a committee that, or a program that you all put together. And we can talk about open meeting law. That is the other tricky piece. We can get our attorney just to see if he has any insight on what that would look like for us. Because there's some, you know, in addition to meeting, there's talking back and forth amongst each other about city business. And we just want to make sure that we're being transparent and any business is being talked in a public manner. So we can talk about those things if this is what the committee would like to do for the upcoming year.
Just a little bit of input from the county. We do have one city who, from their senior committee, started a senior center. Yes, they basically play cards and games during that time, but that's what they want to do. The county has hosted lunch and learns, so it's not so much physical activity, but it's more educational. And when I say host, we offer to, we have a small budget, $300, so 3 lunch and learns a year, that the committee decides they want to bring in. So what they're doing this year is they're bringing in the Southern Valley I don't know what it's called, the Legal Alliance, for 3 different sessions, to offer 3 different sessions that they come in and do for free. So the speaker's free, the county's kind of providing a little stipend for lunch, and then it would just be whoever wants to volunteer to organize it and make it happen and decide. So that is an option also. It's not permanent, long-term, it's not physical activity, but it's somewhere to start.
Well, and to piggyback on that, November is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and we have Emerald Crest. Christine has offered, she has a series of dementia-friendly and Alzheimer's education things. So I think there are some things like that that we could offer or talk about maybe doing that aren't real labor intense, and just as a start to get some educational things as maybe once a year, or some bigger event, but just to show older adults in our community that, we're looking at, as the Senior Advisory Committee, some educational and some other opportunities for participation.
Yeah.
And we can definitely do something. I'm not trying to discourage, I just want to make sure that we're abiding by all the rules and regulations that are put before us. But if I'm sensing from the group that this is something that would be of definite interest to the group of trying to launch something, whether that be we just rent the Lions Pavilion or book a room at the Recreation Center. We can start off small. Maybe it's a couple times a year, and we have a committee member recommend a program and contact the person to do it. And then on the staff side, we advertise it in the brochure. We put out our regular advertisements for it, and we see how it's attended, see how we can go from there.
It's an interesting idea. We don't have a staff for senior citizens. There's a rec we have Melissa, but what I mean is, like, the rec center has a couple people and they have a facility and a program. Mm-hmm. There's no senior center here, and there's nobody running the
Right.
senior center. That would be the
Exactly.
place for this. Another idea that crosses my mind is the library is right down here. Mm-hmm. I take my grandkids to the library once in a while they have a story time, like on Tuesday mornings or something. Why can't we have senior citizen time at a certain, so that facility is here, it's available, and it's probably free, right, to use it, but there could be programming through them maybe that would save us building a facility and having our own staff.
And that would be a conversation with the Carver County Library on what their idea is. I know that they're looking at doing additional programming when they're talking about long-term facility use. The little tidbit, the Victoria Library uses council chambers for their programming. They work with us on that, so this is kind of their space if they're doing kind of larger programs. Doesn't say that, Patrick's been very willing on advertising programs, so it's not to say that even if we host it either here or across the street or wherever, that they wouldn't mind putting it in their calendar.
I see the rec center has a meeting with the sheriff or a meeting with the police once a month. Mm-hmm. I just read about that. I've not gone, but something similar to that, if we could come up with some speaker. Mm-hmm. And then we had all of them we had at the expo. I'm sure there are a number who would be more than willing to come in for an hour or whatever. I hope we get an audience. That's the only hang up. But
yeah. And just looking at the room, we could do it every other month. We have 6 committee members. If a committee member picks a month to find a presenter or a topic, if that's something the committee would be interested in, we could see if we could book facilities and kind of do that part of it. So think about that.
I think it's worthy of, I personally, of, a further discussion in 2023. Don't know other people's opinions.
I will say the winter brochure is coming out already, so we've kind of missed that deadline for, I think that goes until March. So maybe it's something that we look at starting in April. The spring brochure will be out at that time, and we can hit the ground running in that time frame and go from April till next April if we wanted to do something like this.
I think these things we've talked about get under the plan, under the one that you picked on, Sue, was recommend better ways to communicate and reach the population. So this can be an ongoing discussion, right?
Absolutely.
And it's already in the work plan.
Right.
Under-
Curtis.
I'm back into baseball again, but I think basically what we're talking about here for other groups and other cities, what if we were to have a senior day out at Vic's game when they play Chanhassen and when they play Chaska? And we advertise that we're gonna host that for all the seniors from Chaska, from Chanhassen on those nights. And we use that as an opportunity to meet other seniors, talk to other,
Sure.
leaders, stuff like that. I don't know who would have to bless that, but.
We, going back to hosting everything every other month, maybe in June or July, and this is assuming that we talk to the Victoria Vics and we do get their blessing. We talk to the rec department because this would be in their wheelhouse, but having that be our July meeting or July get together is at the baseball field, and we'll have our booth and kind of those things. So I think that's definitely possible, but we could see what their interest is in.
We got tons of good ideas.
I know, I love it.
This is time to execute on some.
Well, I mean, the times would be whenever they're scheduled, that, when Chaska's.
No, I mean, we have her time to make the phone calls and.
Oh, okay.
Got it. We're limited by the amount of hours in the day for our one staff member that's assigned to us, besides our own time.
Right.
We participate.
Well, and just at least the conversation has started, a little more in depth, and some activities. Baseball's a great idea, but I think one thing, my thought that we really want to keep in mind as a way to maybe try to be there when they dedicate the pickleball courts.
Yeah.
That will be, I would imagine, just seeing the number of people that play pickleball. That would be an opportunity that, for us to be there, and maybe with the Park and Rec Commission, and just have a presence and try to interact or whatever.
Listen, I think what I would summarize, we're hearing that we want to talk about more activities. We don't have lots of ideas, and maybe we can get something scheduled, but I would think this would be a good agenda item for each of our meetings, to have a time when we talk about, okay, what are the ideas and so forth. And that could be our proclamations section of the meeting. But I think for a while at least, it would be good to have that as an agenda item. And I don't know how you get the people that come to talk, but it would be good, I think, to focus on anybody we invite to the meetings. Dawn's great, and she always gives us the health information. But if there's people that would help stimulate some of that discussion, it'd be good for us to think about.
Absolutely. We can make that a reoccurring agenda item.
Yeah,
100%.
at least for a while, till we wear it out or we move forward with it. I want to move down to the next item, the downtown west.
Yeah, so this is something.
What can we do there? What's the point? I mean, do we just know about it, or is there any activity?
Yeah, great question. So downtown west, as you all are aware, is a kind of a new section of downtown. The city has about 13 and a half acres, kind of behind the daycare and the Dairy Queen over there. And the visioning is to create a downtown or an extension of our downtown. And for lack of better words, we just call it Downtown West. Right now, we're in phase 1 of that project, and part of that includes a central area green space that can be used for recreation, can be used for just walking, it could be used for city events in the future. So what the idea was here, if the committee is interested, is to, starting in January, have our Community and Economic Development Director come and present on what Downtown West is. And then at that following meeting, have us kind of take a survey that kind of talks about, you know, what do we want as a committee for that Downtown West idea, and provide some feedback. We're only in phase 1, so I put down continuous here as kind of an end date, because in the future years to come, we'll have phase 2, we'll have phase 3, we'll have phase 4, and we'll want to continue to have your feedback at the table for this new area of our community.
Could you explain that a little more? And that's going to be multi-type of housing, to my knowledge, with some parking and some green space. What else is involved in phase 1?
That is primarily it for phase 1. It's just we have one building proposal currently, and then that green area space is additional parking as well. So it's mostly focused on then that green area currently.
Market rate housing?
I could not tell you specifically on what kind of.
Maybe it hasn't been determined.
Yes, yep.
So it says continuous, but it's really in the next couple meetings, January and February, there'll be some activity.
Just for this year, and then, you know, as more projects come online.
helpful.
Whether, I couldn't tell you when the next developer might come knocking at our door. It could be in June, it could be in 2025, but want to make sure that it's continuously on our radar if this is something that the committee would like to pursue. Unless, you know, in our previous discussion, we kind of talked a lot about communication and recreation programming. This is maybe something that we're not interested in as a committee, and we want to take it off our table. This is up to you all on where you think your best, where your interests best lie.
Can I add, so that's Downtown West, and from watching city councilor hearing and reading, I think that's great, but isn't there, and I don't know if you can answer this, but talk about more, but it's all talk, senior housing off of Highway 5, you know, some multi-housing there with senior components right by, is it Lake Town Road, or somewhere off of 5?
South side of Highway
South-
5.
There is a proposal being discussed on some sort of senior housing complex over there. Now, has that gotten very far? Not 100% sure on exactly where the time frame is on that development. The Planning Commission typically manages any sort of development area, and that would most likely still be on their plate for any sort of approval or conversation related to that.
Thank you.
And then looking at that second page, we briefly talked, but developed that walking and route trail. I think the idea behind that is to have a meeting, but maybe not as an informal meeting. We're all sitting at the dais, but taking a look at the city as a whole, printing off large images of our city maps, our current trail system, those sidewalks, those paved or gravel trails, and start mapping it out as a community, just taking a look, using a marker and drawing out what our ideal, you know, possible trail might be. And we can invite the Park and Rec Committee to engage in that process with us, and then walking those trails together and seeing, you know, we did this on paper, how does it actually feel for us? Does this make sense for a trail map or a route? Is it a little too long? Is it a little too short? Is the incline a little too much? And then also in that same idea, are we missing things on this trail system? Are we missing benches? Are we missing wayfinding? Are we missing garbage cans? You know, all those little things that we might miss unless we're actually walking that path. And there's an opportunity to invite other members of the community to those events or to those walking activities. It does not have to just be the committee. It could also be the Able Light Bethesda community. It could be the Steiger Lake condos. We could open it up to the public. We can kind of take that as more of a grassroots effort to develop our own version of what trails would be.
One of the things that I brought up before, and I walk the trail a lot, the trails, is just trail manners. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've almost been wiped out by bikes going fast to my left with my, my dog is heeling to me, and nobody's, they don't say on your left, they just whiz by. And so I think for seniors, especially walking on those trails, it's somewhat, you take a little risk out there because people aren't paying attention to those things.
That's a good point.
And I think this is another great opportunity for some communication efforts, is when we have those trail routes developed, it could be us walking those trails with others, inviting the community to say, hey, we have these new trail routes that we're looking into. We could also talk about safety. Yeah. I know that obviously you're not the one that's biking past at tremendous speeds, but we could talk about, how to be aware, what to look for. And then in addition, the other piece of this is develop some sort of trail map that can be printed or digitally available. We can have a section on that trail map, assuming it folds in a brochure on trail etiquette, trail safety, sure, and kind of really hit hard on those issues, because it is very important that we're being kind to our neighbors and making sure that we're being safe around each other.
Alyssa, are you assuming that you're the person that does a lot of the work to coordinate this, and we come and participate, take the hikes and so forth, and you accumulate that feedback and then lead the effort to print maps and so forth?
That would be the anticipation as your staff liaison, to kind of manage or take lead on some of these identified items in this work plan. That is to say, on this second column, we have parties involved. I will not be alone in these discussions. You will not be alone in these discussions. We have, specifically for that project, bringing in our Park and Recreation Department, bringing in that Park and Recreation Committee, bringing in community development, public works, because there's some maintenance pieces involved when we talk about trail systems. And then I think something that was missing on here, but we can talk more about that depending on how we would like to go, but just the overall community and bringing them in. But when it comes to inviting or sending those emails and making those phone calls, yeah, that would be something I would take the helm on.
We had someone that came in from the county, didn't we, that talked about possible resources?
There was a speaker I was thinking too that mentioned grant opportunities.
We did. Pat Stieg from Carver County Public Health Office came and talked about possible grant opportunities. And as we discussed internally, I think this was something that we would like more of a grassroots effort around, something the committee would take control over and really kind of develop those trail routes instead of having it be more of an engineered, focused, planner-focused consultant group that comes in. We thought it would be better for us as a community to kind of develop that trail route system for our community. So that was kind of our thought and why we leaned towards this direction. And then those grant opportunities, assuming they're still available come future years, they can help with wayfinding, getting those signs up, benches. They've been actually helping us gather or bring more benches to our trails and parks for the last couple of years. And even printing of maps and things like that.
I know that at the recreation center, I picked up a trail map that they had. I didn't look at it real good, but anyway, I picked one up. But just out of naiveness, so yeah, some of our trails are city trails and some are Carver County, or they don't call it Three River Parks anymore, do they?
The Lake Minnetonka Regional Trail.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because this trail is this a city trail out here?
It is not.
Yep, and that's where a lot of bike traffic is. And so is that identified, or will it be identified are we just looking at City of Victoria trails and not the other in this study?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think we can definitely utilize other regional trails when we're creating trail routes. There's nothing saying that we have to avoid certain trail systems. Obviously, the light rail has their own trail routes developed. They have a beautiful map right outside our city hall here that talks about, the different areas you can go to regionally. But if you're just in Victoria as a visitor and you're looking for areas to go maybe downtown, or if you're a resident and you're looking for new areas to explore in the city, this would kind of be the audience we'd be looking for this specific trail route.
And how to connect possibly?
And so if there's a connection utilizing the Lake Minnetonka Trail or a county trail, we can definitely utilize those. Yep.
It looks like you've kind of scheduled this out throughout the year, that the first part of the year would be focused on getting the expo organized and set up, and then we move to this project.
Yep, that was the initial plan. And we can talk more about incorporating that communication or those programs in there and intertwine it. The first part of the year, that January, February meeting, we really hit hard on, according to this proposed plan, the Downtown West discussion. Those first 2 meetings would be dedicated to that. However, that won't take up the entire meeting, so Senior Expo will be a big piece of that. And then what we can do in, let's say, February, March, April, is talk about the Expo as well as additional programs that we might want to hold. And I think the Expo as well as those programs really go hand in hand, so I think there's going to be a lot of cross-communication or cross-discussion when discussing one versus the other. And then once we hit into that summer months, that is a perfect opportunity to start venturing outside, so then we can start looking at trail routes and making that progress there.
That's good. You want to comment on the last item about Carver County Office of Aging?
Yes, of course. Well, we love to have Dawn here, so I would love for her to continue to be part of these discussions. That's kind of what this is hinting on, is to continue to invite her to these meetings, to get her input. If she has anything to present, make sure she has a seat at the table. And similar to what we've been discussing, if she has any input, because Dawn, you are part of these meetings for almost every city in the Carver County area, and you know what's going on, to bring those resources to us or let us know what other communities are up to. So that is the last item.
I have one question. Is there any way, if we're going to get into the Downtown West discussion, that we could have like an update on what's going on with the city downtown now? I'm talking about, like, I've heard that the land across from Floyd's has been sold. Victoria House has been empty now for a couple of years. Is there any way we could just have somebody come in and give us an update on what's going on in our downtown as it is now?
That's a great question. And I think as a committee, that's maybe not something we want to discuss as a committee, but that's definitely something I can connect you with our community development director, and she'd be able to have that conversation with you on what's kind of going on. But as a committee, I think, we're going to be looking at, what can we do actively for Downtown West, and what changes we want to make sure happen before Downtown West actually happens. So I think that's maybe a side conversation. It's a very important conversation to have, but I don't know if it's a committee conversation.
Is
So
the
you would
woman from Bethesda, Able Light, is she still involved with us?
We invite her to the meetings similar to Patrick, and if they're able to make it, we'd love to have them join us. She hasn't been for the last few meetings and last year maybe, but we'll continue to invite her because her input's definitely welcomed.
I'll talk to her.
Please do. We'd love to have her. We have chairs available.
So you'll follow up with hooking up Jenny with the
I will.
person? Good. I think we're ready for our action item here. We need to approve the work plan. We've had good discussion about it. Anybody ready to move approval of the work plan as presented?
I so move to approve the 2023 work plan.
I second.
2023, you said?
2020.
All right.
Any opposed? Same sign. Carries. We're ready for other business then. Any committee members have any other business to bring before the group? I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn then. Would somebody like to move that?
I'm so moved that we adjourn.
Thank you, Jack. It's been moved. Second?
Second.
Curtis got the second on that one. Gets his name in the record book. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It carries and we'll stand adjourned. Thank you, Alyssa.
That's such an interesting point, because I try to follow the city